Yeah, so today we're going to be looking at assessment and feedback. Please be aware that this will be recorded and it will be made available to you, but if you do not wish to be identified, then you can turn your camera off. You can also remove your name as well, if you wish. I recommend that you close all your other browsers while we're in the presentation, because then you do get a better sound quality and it does improve your connection, and also it does remove any distractions as well. And obviously if you do lose connection, then just log out and log back in, and then hopefully you will get back on. Can you just let me know, can you actually see the PowerPoint that I'm sharing? Can just Emma Graham, yeah? Cool. Charlie, what are you doing? Okay, so the same as what has been said previously from Danny about online safety and etiquette. Obviously, just check your professional surroundings, make sure you haven't got any dirty knickers in the background, any sort of naked partners walking around. If you want to keep your camera on, great. Obviously, we expect participation, but as I said, if you don't want to be identified, then you can turn that off. Please mute unless you're contributing to the session, just because we do get a lot of background noise. And the best thing to do is, if you do want to speak, is to raise your hand. There's a little icon that you can press on the screen to get attention, or use the chat bar that should be at the top of the screen as well. And then you can put your comments in there and I will pick them up at some point in the session. Okay, so I have, and I'm hoping it's going to work, I've put a link in the chat box to a form, and it's a knowledge check form. So you should be able to go to the chat box, you should be able to click on the link, and you should be able to just complete the 6 questions that I've left there. Now, I know in Bedford there's a few of you, so either just choose a couple of you to do it one at a time, or just sit and answer the questions yourself, writing them down. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to do that. Let me know if there's any issues with accessing the link. But the 6 questions are: how long have you been an assessor tutor? And it gives you some options. How confident are you in conducting assessment? How confident are you with giving appropriate feedback? How confident are you with using the program tracker? How confident are you're able to demonstrate learning and progression in each lesson? And how confident are you with creating an assessment plan? And it's multi-choice answers from very confident down to not confident. If you scroll up, Beverly, it was the first thing I did when I started the meeting. So if you scroll right up to the top of the meeting chat, it should be in there. Okay, let me try again then. Okay, I've just put it on there again. Can you see it now?
Sorry, Jen, I was just on the phone then.
No worries. So there's just a link there for you to click on and complete, Charlie. I'll just give you a couple of minutes. If you could just let me know in the chat bar when you've completed it, that'd be great. Okay, so I've got 4 responses so far.
Just a couple of issues there with being able to open it, I think, Jen. What's the issues, Beverly, Yasmin?
Let me sign in. It keeps asking for my account details and things like that.
Okay. All right, not to worry, not to worry. Let's just answer a couple of those questions for me then. If you can't sign in, so these are just 2, I think it's Yasmin and Beverly that can't sign in. Just in the chat bar, if you wouldn't mind, how long have you been a tutor assessor? Okay. Okay, so fairly new. And how confident are you with conducting feedback and conducting assessment and providing feedback? So very confident, down to not at all confident. Cool. Okay. So I think it's safe to say we have got a mixture in the room. If I just look at the results. So we've got a few people in the room that have been a tutor assessor for more than a year, whether it's at FSG or other places. And we've got a few people that are fairly new, so less than 3 months. And we've got, in terms of confidence, most people are somewhat confident or neutral with assessment, and the same with feedback. How about the program tracker? So the people that can't access it, do you all know what a program tracker is? So a yes or a no answer. On my results here, it says that the people are somewhat confident with the program tracker. Okay, so that's a good start. You know what it is. How confident do you think you are in demonstrating learning and progression in each lesson? So from extremely confident down to extremely not confident. On my results here, again, most people are somewhat confident. They think they can demonstrate learning and progression in each lesson. Okay, that's good. And finally, how confident are you with creating an assessment plan? So are you extremely confident you know how to create an assessment plan? Or are you not confident at all? Or are you somewhere in the middle? So on here, I've got one person who is extremely confident and 3 people who are somewhat confident. So nobody on here that would not be confident in creating an assessment plan. Okay. So that's a good start. So we know in this session, I'm not talking to anybody who doesn't know what an assessment plan is, doesn't know what learning and progression looks like in each session, and doesn't not know what a program tracker is. So that gives me a good starting point to know where I'm going to be pitching this session today. Thank you for doing that. Okay, moving on. If I can get the slides to move. Okay, so today, our intent for the session is that we're going to be looking predominantly at assessment and feedback. We're going to be having a little look at the changes that we're going to be implementing to our formative feedback approach, changes to our program tracker, and then there's going to be a big emphasis on learning and progression from each candidate in each session. And we will be carrying on with that in our next session on teaching and learning a little bit later this morning. So our outcomes for the session is to look at the roles and responsibilities of the assessor, the different feedback stages and appropriate feedback, how to use and program tracker effectively, and then strategies for demonstrating learning, progression and impact. Any questions before we move on? Okay, so everybody will just need a piece of paper and a pen at this point. And this is a true or false quiz based on assessment. So I would like you just to write down your answers, either true or false to the questions. And then we're going to run through the answers in a moment, okay? So this is just to check your knowledge on assessment and to see what you know and what you don't know. Okay, so question 1. Assignment briefs must be internally verified before issued to candidates. True or false? So just write them down. You don't need to give the answers yet. Question 2. Assignment briefs must only be used for written tasks. True or false? Question 3, it is permitted to issue the assignment to the candidate at the start of teaching a topic. So you can issue the assignment to the candidate at the start of teaching a topic, true or false? Question 4, one retake opportunity may be authorised if a candidate after resubmission has still not met all pass criteria. Question 5, observation records are only used to support and enhance candidate generated evidence or video evidence. So observation records are only used to support and enhance candidate generated evidence or video evidence. Question 6. Making reasonable adjustments in assessments ensures candidates with a disability or learning difficulty are not substantially disadvantaged. True or false? Making reasonable adjustments in assessments ensures candidates with a disability or learning difficulty are not substantially disadvantaged. Question 7, it is okay to give the candidates their grades as soon as you have marked the work. Question 8, an assessment plan is needed for a short program. And question 9, assessment plans cannot be amended once the program has started. Okay, so that's it, 9 questions. Okay, so this is self-assessment, so I'm going to run through the answers. So you're going to have to be honest now and honestly mark yourself whether you got it correct or not. Okay, so question 1, assignment briefs must be internally verified before issue to candidates. That is true. Would anybody like to explain why they must be internally verified before you issue them to candidates?
Is it because they need to be consistent across the company and the program? Because these are the briefs, aren't they? The assignment briefs.
Yep.
They're not actually the assessment plans. They're the assignment briefs. So they're basically the course content, aren't they?
Well, what does an assignment brief do? What do we use it for?
Yeah, it's basically outline of it's basically an outline of the content and what structure it could take, isn't it? And the content to be covered.
Your scheme of work, wouldn't it? So your scheme of work gives you an overview of the content.
Do you know what? I might be getting mixed up with the scheme of work. So I use the scheme of work a lot.
Yeah, I think you probably are. So
my confusion, haven't I?
That's fine. No, it's fine, because other people might be thinking the same, Jeremy.
Yeah.
So the assignment brief is what we use to generate the evidence for assessment. So it is our assessment document. It tells the candidate what they need to do in order to create evidence for that assessment. And the reason it needs to be verified before it's issued to those candidates is because if somebody doesn't check it and make sure that it's going to generate the correct evidence, then the candidates are going to do it wrong. And that means when it then comes to submitting that assessment, they're not going to pass. So you've unfairly disadvantaged them because you've not given them the opportunity in order to pass.
Yeah. By the way, these are the assignment briefs are, if you take the workbook as an example, they're at the beginning of each unit, aren't they? And I think it says you will need to pass, you will need to do to pass, colons, and then it's got a list, hasn't it?
That's it, yeah.
Linking with the learning objectives thing. Okay, got it. Check.
You must always make sure that when you're given an assignment brief for your program, that it has been signed by an internal verifier. And it's been signed by an internal verifier recently. So if it was signed last September in 2019, it might be out of date. That qualification might have been updated. So it's your responsibility as the tutor assessor that when you get those assignment briefs for your program, that you're checking to make sure that they have been signed, they're fit for use, and they were signed recently. And if they're not, then you should be challenging that. You should be questioning, because otherwise you're going to put your candidates on this journey of completing this assessment, and they might get right to the end of it and you might realize it was all for nothing because it's out of date or it's not valid. Okay. Question 2, assignment briefs must only be used for written tasks. That is false. Assignment briefs are, as I just explained, they are our assessment documents. They are what we give to candidates to let them know what assessment they need to complete and what evidence they need to generate, which means that you will have a range of assessment in there. All formal assessment opportunities will be covered in an assignment brief. So that may include observations, presentations, practical tasks, posters, everything, as long as it hits the area. And issue the assignment to the candidate at the start of teaching a topic. I'm interested to know who thinks that that's true, that you can give me a raise of hands. It's permitted to issue the assignment to the candidate at the start of the topic, start of the learning. Okay.
Well,
Is it
until very recently, Jen,
Okay.
you know my stance on it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so it's actually false.
Ah, I put
Okay.
false and I changed my mind.
So once the assignment is issued, you can no longer teach any of the content. So I know some people, I'm not going to name any names, so that, you know, I may be one of them, may start with a group, get the assignment brief out, give it to them, and then say, right, we're going to look at all of this learning today, and then you're going to complete the assignment. And then we're going to look at all the learning, and then you're going to complete the assignment. Actually, that is not what you should be doing, because once they've physically got that assessment, you should not be giving them any more teaching, because that would be considered to be coaching them. That'd be considered to be helping them too much. So you teach them all of the knowledge and the skills and everything you need to do in order for them to get them to the point where they can complete the assessment, and then you give them the assessment, and then they have to work on it independently. Okay, does that make sense, Jeremy?
Yeah, isn't it the assignment though?
But the assignment, I mean, you know what the assignment contains, so you can get your candidates to do lots of formative assessment. You can get them to do basically what is in the assignment, but formatively. But then once you give them that assessment document, that assignment, they must sit and work on that independently, and there can be no more teaching involved. So you can't give it to them and then carry on teaching. It needs to be a handover process, right? Here is your assessment. Imagine they were going into an exam. You wouldn't be able to go into an exam and sit and teach them while they were doing the exam, would you? And an assignment brief is exactly the same thing. It is our version of an exam. It's their final assessment. You look confused.
Well, I'm just thinking about how it works in terms of the workbooks, because there's we're talking about the assignment rather than the assignment brief.
Well, the assignment brief is on the assignment.
Yeah.
So, and I think probably the confusion here is that you're calling it a work, which would then indicate that it was formative, that it's worksheets and work they would do during the teaching and learning stage.
Yeah.
So I think it's about changing the terminology on that. And
Right.
as I say, you can take tasks from the workbook yourself and get them to do it so that you know that they're ready for the assessment. But once they actually sit and complete that assessment, they must do that independently. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
If there's any confusion, then we'll have a chat after, Jeremy. Okay.
No, it's all good. Thanks for clarifying.
Okay. Question 4.
Jen, just quickly on that one.
Yeah.
Sorry, just really quickly. From that perspective, if I was putting myself in the shoes of a tutor working virtually, that could potentially cause barriers. I mean, there's definitely ways around it. So I suppose what my advice is at this point in time is, like Jen's just said there, if you're going away thinking, my goodness me, that's going to be a huge challenge, working virtually, especially with candidates that have got ICT barriers and stuff, then pick up the phone to myself, Emma, and Jen as well, to see what we can do to support you and the candidates, to ensure things are kind of done effectively.
I think, I agree. Just to back up Jen here, the stance that we've got to be careful of is that what Jen's saying is that you are not giving somebody an assessment worksheet, a workbook or assignment brief, whatever it is, and delivering from that. Okay, you are not teaching from that and then pausing to allow them to populate that or to fill it in, because what you're not doing right there and then is checking retention of knowledge and understanding. Okay, all they're doing is just literally copying off a board or flipping it straight in. If you show them the assignment brief, if you explain to them what it is, then great, because what you're actually doing is you're showing the end where you're going to, but you can't teach from it. Okay, and I think that a good example may well be what Lisa and the team have been doing around non-accredited learning. So you have developed all these ranges of assessment, so to speak, but the work booklets, the worksheets, the task sheets, the projects and things like that, that is massively important as evidence of progression in learning. Then you might have 10 multi-choice questions right at the very end, which then could be classed as assessment of retained knowledge. It's going to be something that we are going to have to revisit and talk through, because it is going to be slightly different for a lot of people in how they have been delivering and teaching and so on and so forth. But it is really important, like Charlie says, that you reflect on what Jenna's information is, and then you come back to us at a later point. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's move on because we're running out of time. So question 4, one retake opportunity may be authorised if a candidate after resubmission has not met all past criteria. That is true. So they are allowed 2 attempts at assessment, and once it's been submitted, if it's still deemed to not be a pass, they may be authorised to do it again, but that authorisation has to come from the lead IV, which is me in this organisation. Okay, so the assessor cannot make that decision themselves. Observation records are only used to support and enhance candidate-generated evidence or video evidence. That is true. So observation records are not sufficient on their own. So say a candidate needs to demonstrate communication skills and they maybe deliver a presentation and you write an observation on them. That observation record is not sufficient on its own. It is used to enhance actual physical evidence. So if we can get a recording of that presentation, then great. If we can get any candidate generated evidence, such as their presentation notes or other candidates' observations on them, then great. But an observation on its own is not sufficient because there is no evidence there to say that it is authentic. Question 6, making reasonable adjustments in assessments ensures candidates with a disability or learning difficulty are not substantially disadvantaged. Yeah, of course, that is true. So we do not have to give the same assessment to every candidate, no matter what. We can make reasonable adjustments to ensure that everybody is given the opportunity to achieve. So if you do have a candidate and they're not able to achieve the assessment as it is at the moment, then make sure you approach your managers, you approach quality, and we look at the reasonable adjustments that can be made. Question 7, it is okay to give the candidates their grades as soon as work that I'm in. Hands, if you think that is true, is it okay to give them their grades as soon as you have marked the work? So you can say, great, you passed, well done. I've marked it, you passed. Charlie, what about a Bedford? I can see you back there. Okay. So, no, it is false. You must not tell the candidates they have passed until it has gone through the verification stage. So you need clarification from the IV to say it has passed. Now you can share the grade with that candidate. Okay. Question 8. Sorry, go on.
Can I just ask, actually? So, does it depend on the type of course?
Well, if it's non-accredited, then that's fine because they're not working towards a qualification. But the issue you've got is if they're working towards a qualification and you say, well done, you passed, you're going to achieve that qualification, brilliant, and then it goes to IV and they go, no, this is all wrong.
I see.
You're then going to have to go back to that candidate and go, sorry, I got it completely wrong. You haven't achieved it. You're going to have to redo it. So you just need to make sure that you're not telling them that they've passed until it's been confirmed, and then you can go back and go, great, hurrah, you passed.
And
if it's non-accredited, then yeah, that's absolutely fine.
And I guess you need to strike a balance because you need to ensure that it's the best standard possible. So you can say, okay, I think this looks like that's that's definitely the standard we're looking for now. You've definitely filled in those gaps that we pointed out or whatever.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
you still give them the feedback and still say, you know, you can say like, I'm confident now, this is passed, you've done everything, but you obviously with us, it's mainly a pass or a fail. You know, we don't really work with gradings. So you know, you've got your pass, merit, distinction. So we've got a sports program that we use that in. But a lot of people, so this would mainly be for those kind of programs, because you may turn around and say to somebody, right, great, you've got a distinction, and then it goes to IV and they go, no, it's only a merit. And then you've got to go back to that candidate and say, I'm sorry, you didn't get a distinction after all, you only got a merit. So it's mainly for that. It works with the pass and the fail as well.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, question 8. An assessment plan is needed even for a short program. That is true. An assessment plan is needed for any program where there is assessment. And question 9, assessment plans cannot be amended once the program has started. That's false. So assessment plan is a working document, and we are completely aware that things will change. Candidates are always different, groups are always different. So you have your dates planned into your assessment and they may be amended, and that's absolutely fine. The thing to do is to make sure that that is always communicated, okay? So you've got your assessment plan, you know what dates you're going to be conducting assessment with those candidates. If that changes, you must be telling the lead IV, which in this case is me. So that must come into quality because it has a knock-on effect. Okay, we will have scheduled IV, the business support would have scheduled for finance, the business support would have scheduled for the certifications. So it has a massive knock-on effect if you decide to push back your assessment and not meet the deadlines. What I'd suggest you do is you just use version control. So if you're going to change your assessment, you know, the first one is called version 1 and then version 2, etc. Just so then you know exactly which one you're working from and you can communicate that with everybody involved. Also, you may have some candidates who start at different times, particularly on the virtual learning. I know that you've had candidates that are on different pathways or they started on different dates. So in that case, they should have their own assessment plan because they may not be following the same as the rest of the group. And again, that is absolutely fine to have individual assessment plans for each candidate. Okay, any questions about all of that we've just gone through? Obviously, I will put the slides up on the Padlet afterwards so you can refer back to them. But there's maybe a couple of things in there I think that people weren't aware of. So if you've got any questions, either raise them now or we can have a chat individually at the end, or stick them in the chat bar and we can come back to them. Okay, so moving on because I'm very conscious of time. Hello? Area 1?
Jen, Amy's got something.
Yeah, sorry, Jen, I was waiting. I'm at the back table. Just really quickly, I wanted to ask when the question come up. You know, when you said if the date on the unit is, say, a year ago, to double check it because it might have been upgraded. How far back would we let it go before we double check, or we double check every time?
Well, generally they're IVs in preparation for the new academic year. So normally they should have either August or September on them. And so if they haven't got August or September from 2020, then I would be questioning it.
Okay, cheers, thank you. Because
the awarding bodies will issue the new ones normally within the new academic year, the new versions of the qualification. So that's, if it's not within the last couple of months, you know, I'd be asking about it. Obviously, as we get to February, March, April, you can still be using the ones that were issued in August or September. But really, what you should be doing is you should be getting that when you get your assignment brief, even though the assignment brief has been IV'd, as part of the IV process, we need to check dates for assessment as well. So you should really be getting that assignment brief checked each time because you should be submitting it with your dates on it so that we can check to make sure that the assessment is timely. So it's got your formative date on it, your summative date, your issue date, and we should be checking that. But that's a separate issue. So we'll move on. Okay.
Thank you.
Roles and responsibilities of the assessor then. So an assessor, and also I'm calling it an assessor today because your role is predominantly as a tutor, but I think you need to know that there is a divide there. So you are working in two separate roles, because as I explained, once you give them the assessment, they should be working quite independently. So you're a tutor up till the point where they do that assessment, and then they complete the assessment and then you assess it. So we're talking about an assessor. So we're talking about that part of when you're working with the candidates, but obviously you're tutor and assessor, you're doing both. So your role is to assess candidates fairly and accurately against the specified learning aims and assessment criteria, following the rules of assessment to meet national standards. So if that is a qualification, then you will have a specification and you will have assessment criteria to go by. If it's not a qualification, then it's exactly the same. We will have created our own assessment criteria or our own outcomes, and you're still assessing against them. It's just obviously the difference is that you are not then putting them forward for a qualification. But all the same rules apply. Your role is to decide when the candidate is suitably prepared to undertake the assessment and the assignment. And as we said, once the candidates have been issued with the assignment, it is essential they work independently and produce their own work. You also take care to ensure that each candidate understands the assessment requirements, the nature of the assessment they need to produce, the importance of time management and meeting deadlines, including the consequences for late submission. So I think one of the issues that we have here is, I've just referred to the assessment as an exam, and I think a lot of the candidates don't realise that. And again, I think that might be because the assessment, it's too familiar, it's out too much, it's given to them while they're in the teaching and learning stage, so they don't see it as an assessment document. They don't see the importance of it. And I think it is your responsibility as the tutor and the assessor to make sure that candidates understand that this is an assessment document. This is what's going to get you your qualification. And it's really important that you understand the consequences of that. So, of completing it neatly, of taking your time with it, making sure, if you're not sure about spellings and grammar, that you're doing a rough version first and you're checking it before you put it into the final version. And the biggest problem is meeting those deadlines. So particularly with BTEC, with Pearson, they are very strict on that if a learner does not meet the assessment deadline, they shouldn't be allowed to submit it. Now, it's slightly different for us in the way that we are working, and we do need to allow a certain amount of flexibility. But if the awarding body come and do an inspection, that is what they'll be looking for. So it's very important that candidates do realise that those assessment deadlines are very, very important, and they can't just be missed. It's like saying you're going to go into, your GCSE exams on Wednesday. Oh, I can't make Wednesday, I'll do it Thursday. Well, no, you can't. You can't do it Thursday. It's on Wednesday. It's not available on Thursday. So it's just changing your terminology and changing the way that you look at it and making sure that the candidates realise that. And if they need an extension, they need to understand that it's a formal process and that they have to be applying for that extension. Okay, so your role and responsibility is to identify opportunities to generate evidence for assessment, create assignment briefs, and plan assessment activities, making best use of different assessment methods. So you're quite lucky at this organisation. We tend to create the assignment briefs for you, but as an assessor, that is one of your responsibilities. So if you worked in a college or you worked in another organisation, you would probably be asked to create your own assignment briefs. And then it is your responsibility to create and generate the evidence for that assessment with the candidates. It's your responsibility to create and agree assessment plans. Again, that's quite often done for you, so you're quite lucky. And submit the assessment plan and the assignment brief to the internal verifier to be agreed and verified. I know there's been quite a lot of confusion about assessment plans recently, and I don't think they're always as visible as they should be. So I think we will look at that at a later stage. I know Emma Graham was talking about doing some training with her staff on that, and it's a whole different issue. So we'll move on for that now. But just know that assessment, if you haven't got an assessment plan physically on your programme, you need one, and you should be asking for one, because that is your overview of when assessment is going to take place. It is your responsibility to share assessment decisions with the candidate and identify opportunities for them to improve their learning through feedback, and ensure the candidate is submitting authentic work. Candidates must produce a signed and dated declaration of authenticity with each assignment, which confirms they have produced the evidence themselves. So again, if you don't have that declaration in whatever form, and we'll look in a minute about what that might be, then don't be sending that work for IB, because it won't be accepted. You have to have declaration from the candidate to say that it's their own work, and complete and maintain safe and secure records. Okay, any questions about all of that? No, cool. Okay, so authenticity. So this has been quite a challenge during lockdown. When we were in the classroom, it was fairly easy because everybody had a physical version of their assessment and they were able to sign it. And so during lockdown, it's been more of a challenge, but that doesn't mean it's still not important and it doesn't have to happen. So assessors should ensure that authenticity is considered when setting assignments. For example, ensuring that each candidate has a different focus for research, which could reduce opportunities for copying or collusion. So your assignment tells you the task they need to do, your assignment brief, but as the tutor, you might look at that and think, I've got 10 candidates, I'm going to have 10 exactly the same answers because I know they're going to Google it and they're going to go to that page and every answer is going to look the same. So you may change the stance on it. So you might say to each, every 3 candidates, this group of 3, right, you're going to look at this, you're going to look at this, you're going to look at this. It's also your responsibility to tell them they cannot just copy it from the internet and that you will be looking for plagiarism, that they need to then write it in their own words. It's important that the authentication of evidence can be validated. When practical and performance evidence is used, it's important to consider how supporting evidence could be captured to support the observation record using video recordings, photographs, handouts, task sheets, etc. As I explained earlier, the observation sheet on its own is not sufficient. You must try and generate other evidence there. And if it's, at the moment during lockdown, if you're not recording them, then it should be like a telephone conversation and a professional discussion. So we just need to know it has come from the candidate. I know particularly recently, we've had some instances where candidates are giving their answers to questions in their assessment over the phone, and the assessors are just writing it down. Well, that is not authentic because that could just come from the tutor, from the assessor. We need to have that recording of that evidence so that we know it has come from the candidate, and it needs to be completed on a proper form, a professional discussion form. It can't just be written into their assessment because that is plagiarism. If through the assessment process it is found that some or all of the evidence is not authentic, assessors need to take appropriate action, including invoking centre malpractice policies as required. So as I said, if you've got 10 candidates and they've all pretty much given you identical answers, you go on to Google and you type in a few words and the whole thing comes up, don't be sending that for IV, because if you've spotted it, we're going to spot it too, and it's going to get sent back to you at a later stage. Deal with it now. Say to them, guys, this is not correct. You've plagiarized. You need to put this into your own words. Electronic signatures are permitted on all assessment documentation at the moment. So while we're working with remote delivery and some people still in lockdown, we can accept electronic signatures. We would rather signatures than the verbal confirmation at the moment. But there needs to be an audit trail to support its authenticity. So you could validate it through an email from the candidate with the record attached, for example. So you could include the email with the assessment to show that it's come from the candidate, because again, you could be signing that yourself. We just need to know it has come from that candidate. Or if you're using things like Google Classroom, you know, you might be able to show on there that they submitted it themselves. And as I said, verbal confirmation, it is permitted, but it is a final resort. So we'd rather not use that method, but if necessary, you speak to them on the phone, you get that verbal confirmation that it's their own work, and you record it, and then that gets logged onto our system. But you must make sure that they do that for each submission separately. So if you've got 5 units in that qualification, you need a separate one for each unit, okay? Okay, so we're going to just whiz through these because we're running out of time and I've still got some more activities for you to do. Okay, so the concepts and principles of assessment. Assessment should be, this is an acronym, VACSR, VASCR, I don't know. So it should be valid, authentic, current, sufficient, reliable. And using VASCR will help you plan and assess in a way that should meet the expected requirements. So valid, meaning that it is appropriate to the subject, it is appropriate to the qualification, and it's appropriate to the level. And as I say, if it's been IV'd and it's been IV'd recently, then you can assume that it is going to be, because we have a standardized process for our assessments. And what we need to ensure is that any candidate in any group is getting the same opportunity in terms of assessment. So that's why we have those standardized assignment briefs. Authentic, as we said, that it's produced solely by them alone. Current, still relevant at the time of assessment. So again, the qualification is up to date, it's the most up-to-date version. Sufficient, the work covers all the assessment requirements. And also that it's related to the vocational nature of the programme. So is there vocational context in there? Is it helping them to enhance their work skills, their employability, for example? You know, if it's a sports qualification, is it referring to sporting context? We're getting these candidates ready to enter the world of work. So we need to let them know how it is relevant. We need to show them this is why you're learning this and this is why you're being assessed on this. This is why it's relevant to what you want to do. And reliable, so it's consistent across all candidates in any group for any assessor. And it's also smart, which we're going to look at detail we're going to look in detail at during our next CPD on teaching and learning, but used in different contexts for assessment, but still valid in terms of, you know, time bound, making sure that there's timeliness on there. You know, they're given enough time to complete the assessment. They're not given too long to complete the assessment. You know, you might issue it on one date and they might not be assessed for 3 months. For the final assessment, but is there too long in between that issue date and that assessment date? Because then if the candidates leave, then and the final assessment's only just happened, then you're going to struggle to get them to do any upgrades if that's necessary. But as I say, we'll look at SMART in detail in the next one. Okay, another little quiz for you. This one is on feedback. So again, I'd like you to write down your answers. Any questions on what we discussed on assessment from anyone? No, excellent. Okay, question 1, there's only 7 on this one. Feedback is a critical part of helping candidates to improve. True or false? Question 2, during teaching, you are able to use mock tests, assessment and give feedback. True or false? Question 3, during teaching, you are able to identify areas where improvement is required. So during teaching, you are able to identify areas where improvement is required. Question 4, once we have given candidates an assignment brief, we can't offer them any feedback. Question 5, when marking candidate work, spelling and grammar errors should be considered when confirming the grade. So when marking candidate work, spelling and grammar errors should be considered when confirming the grade. Question 6, when marking candidate work, you should not give detailed comments that tell the candidate what information should be added. So when marking candidate work, you should not give detailed comments that tell the candidate what information should be added. And question 7, you can annotate candidate work to indicate where they have or have not met the assessment criteria. Okay, so question 1, feedback is a critical part of helping candidates to improve. That is obviously true. Question 2, during teaching, you are able to use mock tests, assessment, and give feedback. True. So mock assessments are an ideal way of deciding whether your candidates are ready to work independently and to prepare them for assessment. Question 3, during teaching, you're able to identify areas where improvement is required. Obviously true, because during the teaching and learning stage, that is where you're preparing them for assessment. So that is where you should be picking up on where there are areas for improvement there to ensure that they're fully ready for the final assessment. Question 4, once we have given candidates an assignment brief, we can't offer them any feedback. Okay, what's our thoughts on this? Who thinks that's true? So once we've given them the assessment, we've given them the assignment brief, we can't offer them any feedback. Put your hand up if you think that's true. Nobody? Excellent. Okay, yep, because that is false. So you can't give them feedback that would specifically show them how to meet the criteria or to get a higher grade, because that would be considered to be coaching. But you can obviously show them how they can evidence things, evidence their knowledge and their skills and their understanding, and you can be constructive on there. You can tell, I'm positive, you can tell them what they've done well, and you can also be constructive and tell them what they could have done better. When marking candidate work, spelling and grammar errors should be considered when confirming the grade. Who thinks that's true? Raise of hands. Oh, okay. So by that, I mean, you know, there's lots of spelling and grammar errors in there, so you decide they haven't passed. Yes, Priska? Or was that you saying yes? You think it's true, or you want to talk?
No, I just wanted to say I think it would make the difference between a distinction and a merit, in my opinion.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
That's what I thought too. It could be the difference between the highest level and the second highest, but
it's a tough one. Obviously, it depends on the level that they're working at. So if we're working at, you know, entry 3, level 1, level 2, then absolutely no, false. You know, their spelling and their grammar should not have any reflection on them being able to achieve, as long as it's not so problematic that you can't understand the evidence. So if you can't understand what they've said and the meanings are not clear, then that's different. But if there's just lots of spelling mistakes in there, but you still get the gist of what they're trying to say and you think they meet the criteria, then that should not influence the decision. Absolutely not. Now, if you're working at level 3 and higher, and you're going for that distinction grade or that merit grade, you're looking for a certain level in terms of technical language, of the correct use of grammar and stuff like that. So it may affect that, but that's your judgment. And actually, you should have picked up on a lot of that during the formative assessment stage. So by the time it gets to the summative assessment, we would expect a lot of that to have been dealt with and then to be helped with that. So they could submit something formatively and you help them correct the feedback and correct the spelling and the grammar on there. So when they do the final assessment, some of those things have already been dealt with. So at Yasmin, they meet the criteria. Yeah. So Yasmin just said false, they might have a learning difficulty, they meet the criteria. Yeah. So absolutely, if they've got a learning difficulty, they still need to be given the same opportunity to achieve, and we won't penalise them for not having correct spelling. But on the flip side of that, as I said, as the IV, we are looking to see that they have been supported in that process, that they've been helped to achieve, and they've been supported with their English. So you would mention it in the feedback, absolutely, and you might say in the feedback, these are the things that you've done to support them, and these are the things they can do to improve in the future, but it would not affect their grade. Yes, Prishka, good point. So Prishka said if they have a learning difficulty, then you would make. Yeah, so if they've got severe dyslexia and when they're writing, you cannot understand what they've written at all and the meaning is not clear and their ideas are all over the place, then you need to make reasonable adjustments there, because it might be that actually when they speak and they tell you the answers, it's very clear, but when they write it down, the meaning is lost. So then you might go to looking at professional discussions. Yes, Priska.
Oh, sorry. I should have put my hand down. I've already said what I wanted to say.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So just remember, if you need to do that and you need to send it back to the candidate because they need to do it again to improve the standard, then you just need to go through that process in terms of the IB and amending the assessment plan and making sure that that is communicated, that you won't be hitting the deadline because you've had to make adjustments for that candidate.
Jen, just very quickly, there will be an external expectation against industry standards. So Ofsted, funders, even IVs, we will, yes, take into account like reasonable adjustments and things like that. But if somebody is going to be filling out, say, PAR-Q forms in a gym industry, there are certain key terms and terminology and wording that they would be expected to be using repeatedly, and therefore be able to evidence that they couldn't spell them at the first few weeks, and at the last few weeks they could spell them correctly, just as an example. So that progression in learning may not affect directly their grade for achievement, but that they are specifically looking for that progression in standards. They're not going to come in and go, we've already said this yesterday, we're not going to give you an amazing grade from Ofsted because everyone on your course passes. That's not what it's about. It's about being evidencing the progression that they've made in their learning. So industry language, if they are expected to use a pen in their job that they're going to go to, then we need to have some sort of writing within their learning and their assessment. So hopefully that kind of gives clarity.
Guys, I'm aware of the time. I'm probably going to need another 10 minutes. So if you need to leave, then do so and the recording will be available. But if not, I'm just going to plough on because there's some really important things I need to get across to you. Okay, so question 6, when marking candidate work, you should not give detailed comments that tell the candidate what information should be added. So that is true. So that's fine in the formative stage, but once you get to summative assessment, once they've submitted that assessment task, you can't give them detailed comments on how they need to improve it, because as I said, they need to be working independently. And Question 7, you can annotate their work to indicate where they have or have not met the assessment criteria. Absolutely true, and something that we like you to do. It is good practice as the assessor to go through and to write on where you think they've met that criteria. So just 1.1 met, for example, because as the IV, it's then easy to pick out those points and to look at them on their own without looking at the whole document. They do not confirm achievement, so you still need to complete the other sections of the marking scheme and the front sheet to say pass or refer, but they are just good indicators within the assessment, particularly at higher levels, you know, level 3, when they're writing more essay style questions, answers, you know, to go through and actually pick out points where they meet the criteria is very good practice. Okay, so I'm sorry we haven't got time to run through all of those questions and answers, but again, we can pick them up separately. Okay, so there's three stages of feedback. Okay, so there's during the teaching and learning stage while they're preparing for assessment, there's during assessment while they're working independently, and then there's following assessment. And the key thing about all of these stages is that it's timely, that they are getting that feedback as soon as possible, so that they are able to make those adjustments and those changes while it is still fresh in their mind. Okay, so I won't read all of that out, but again, you'll get access to these slides. So this gives you some guidance here about the types of feedback that should be given during each stage. So all I will say is the most important aspect here is during that formative teaching and learning stage. That's where they should be getting that really high quality formative feedback. And that is the stage where you're going to help them to progress and help them to develop. Because as I say, once they get to the assessment, they have to work on it themselves. And then following assessment, then you can tell them what they've achieved, how well they've done, but then also give them advice and guidance on what they could have done or what they could do to improve in the future. But at that point, no changes can be made to the assessment. So we're not going to do this activity, we haven't got time. It was just looking at different types of feedback at different stages. So unfortunately, we haven't got time for that. We haven't got time for this either, unfortunately, but I have established that everybody knows what a program tracker is, so that's good. So just moving on to program trackers quickly then. So we've made quite a few changes to our program trackers, and I just wanted to run through them with you. They're going to be issued to you shortly. So at the moment, you've still got the older version. But once they're sent to you, you will notice that there are a few changes. So the program trackers, we use them in this organisation to track candidate progress. That's what they do. And they record all the achievement for each candidate per criteria on a unit by unit basis. So when they're working on a qualification, we're able to go in and check candidates for each unit, how far they have progressed, whether they've achieved on the first attempt or the second attempt for each criteria. They also ensure the assessment evidence is clearly measured against the national standards and it can be reliably verified. So you must submit your program tracker with your assessment to the IV so that they can use it to look at while they're looking at the assessment. So they can see who is that assessor said has passed, for which criteria, and then they can go in and check. So even if a candidate hasn't passed, still submit their work so that, again, the verifier can check. Clearly identifies which assessments and tasks criteria are outstanding. So again, the verifier can check and see, right, this hasn't been submitted for this person, go and check on the tracker, oh, they didn't achieve it on the first attempt, so it's gone back to them. And it helps the verification process. And then it also acts as a communication tool and it provides a narrative for all stakeholders. So the front page document that's got all of the candidates' information and where you're writing all your weekly comments and your targets, that is used between everyone in the organisation, but it's also used with the funders because it's a really good narrative to look at how that candidate is doing. Okay, so the main changes then. So the front page, hopefully you can see that. As I say, you will be sent these, so don't worry too much. But the main page has changed just in some format changes, but the main change here is that there's now a column that's been added next to each aim for you to indicate their progress in percentage. And I have put on there a guidance on how to do that. So just that, for example, if there are 8 units and the candidate has achieved 2 of them, then they have achieved 25% of the qualification. And that can't be generic for every candidate because they will be at different stages. So it's just a simple percentage, how much they have achieved. If they haven't completed any units yet, then it's obviously a 0. And that is fully complete as well. Also, this hasn't changed, but the qualification and achievement rate information is still on there. And I have provided a bit of guidance on there about how to calculate that because some people aren't quite sure. So you need to be completing this document as regularly as possible, and it needs to be submitted into business support on a week-by-week basis so that we can have a look and we can risk rate that program and we can risk rate each element of that program. Because if we look at this and it shows that every single person is behind target on their main aim, then that makes us, that tells us that we need to go in there and we need to start looking at things. You know, if we look at that and it tells us that everyone's behind target, and then in the comments it says that the achievement, attendance has been poor, then again, that's another indicator to us that we need to step in. So this hasn't changed, but you've got your comments and you've got your action plan on there. Again, it hasn't changed, but some people aren't quite filling that out correctly. So it just needs to give us an overview on how that candidate has been that week. You know, give us an insight into how they're getting on, how have they progressed, any targets that were set for them last week, have they achieved them? How are they getting on with their work? What has their motivation been like? If they haven't attended or their behaviour hasn't been good, what have you been doing in order to try and combat that? So we only want a brief comment, but we want as much detail in there as possible. Okay, so the second main change is on the second page. It used to be called overall and it's now called main aim progress, because this is just logging your main aim. So this is logging normally your qualification. And the only difference here is that you used to have a column at the top and you used to have a column at the bottom, and now you've only got one column, but 2 separate things that you're tracking. So you're tracking their grades and you're also whether their submission dates have been met. So you have said that they have to submit that task for that criteria on that date. Have they done that? If it was late, then you need to be saying, because again, these need to be taken into consideration when it was at IB. And there is a key on there to tell you what to put. So if it was on time, it's OB. If it was late, it's an L. And then the final change is that we used to have a page per unit. Well, now there is a page per candidate. Now, the reason this is because our assignment briefs are going to be changing. And at the moment, in our assignment brief, you have a mark scheme. And in the mark scheme, every time the candidate achieves, you tick it off on the mark scheme, you say where the evidence is, and you put your initial and the date. Well, that's going to be going because you're now going to put the information onto here instead. So rather than having to do it twice, which you used to have to do, you used to have to complete the mark scheme and then go onto your program tracker and mark it as achieved. Now you're just going to go onto the program tracker and you're going to mark them as achieved on here instead. But that does mean that when you submit that work for IV, this page needs to be included for that candidate, which is why each candidate page. And this is very similar to what it used to be, but actually a little bit simpler, I think. So before we used to have all sorts of random, codings and keys. Well, now it's very simple. So each of their units is on here, and it's just you've got your targeted grade. So that would be a pass mainly, and then have they achieved on the first attempt? It's a simple yes or no. If they have, it's a yes. You indicate where it is, so it might be in the portfolio, page 3, for example, and then the date that it was submitted. If it was a no on the first attempt, you just need to give comments for that upgrade. And then when they've achieved, you just come to this little box underneath the unit and you say unit complete, yes, and then the final grade was a pass and it was submitted on time. Now, if the formula is working correctly, that information should populate this page for you. So you should never have to touch this page. It should do it all for you. So here, as you can see, I've said the first unit was a pass and it was submitted on time, so it's populated it in there for me on candidate 1. So as I said, you shouldn't have to touch that, and if the formula isn't working, then you need to let us know. Okay, so I whizzed through that really quickly. As I say, there are comments and there is guidance on there, and these are going to be sent out to you within the next week. So if there's any questions at all, please let us know. We are trying to simplify the processes here, okay? We're trying to make sure you're not having to duplicate information. So again, at the moment, the assignment briefs, you're working on the older versions. Again, we're going to be mending those and we're going to be sending them out to you. It may take a little bit of time. But the main change here is that the mark scheme from the assignment brief is now going to be implemented into the program tracker. So we only need that information from you once. Okay, we're going to leave the learning and progression for now because we're going to cover that a little bit in the next session as well, which is in just under an hour. So on this morning. Okay, so we've run over, guys, and we've run out of time. There's lots of chatting, as always. Let's regroup again at 10:30 for the next session, as said, and then we can have a look at some of the things we haven't had a chance to cover in this session. I'll just hang around here for another few minutes if anybody wants to stay on and ask any questions, okay?
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Jim.
Cheers then, thanks.
Hi, Jen.
Hello.
Hi. I wish I would have had this sooner.
Oh, really?
All this information. Yeah, very, very, very informative. Really, really good.
Excellent. Good to hear. So obviously this will all get uploaded to the Padlet. So yeah, make sure you go on and have a look at it.
Yeah, very informative. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you very much.
Jen, are we using this link or a different link for the next session?
I'll set up a new one. I'll send it out now.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.